Scott Willard with the Congruence podcast. Congruence, where faith and business come together. This morning, I'm very excited to have with me Garrett Willie with Do It Right Roofing, and we're going to spend a little bit of time going over our God Talk. I talked a little bit last week about the fact that the God Talk cards came out of a meetup group that my wife and I do called the Gathering Place Northwest, and we gather around a room and we go through these God cards and we let people choose what card they want to talk about and just kind of go through and talk about how those impact their lives. And so we're going to go through a few of those. Garrett and I have chosen a few of those together. First, just let me do a quick shout out for my company, Leadwell Pacific. Leadwell helps leaders create congruence in their professional, their personal, and their spiritual lives so that they create flow, energy, and purpose in the business they do. Garrett, would you talk a little bit about just kind of shouting out about your business, Do It Right Roofing?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So, again, my name is Garrett Willie. My business is Do It Right Roofing. We're a general contractor that specializes in roofing. So that is our vehicle. And what I mean by that is you have a vehicle or a means that you create money and serve people, right? But as far as purpose goes, beyond that, I really like the topic that you have, and one of the cards that you talked about is talking about congruence and what that means. And I had to I looked it up and I was like, congruence, like harmony or whatever. And I started
Right.
looking at it a little bit more, and I was thinking about that, and I was like, wow, that's something that I've been seeking a lot over the last year. Is like, how do I interject or inject my faith, my values into my business,
Yeah.
right? And my purpose,
Right.
right? Because it's like we all have a God-given purpose, and that's why I have a podcast as well. So that's the other thing that if I'm going to plug anything, it's going to be purposeful in life,
Sure.
because my business takes care of itself.
What days does Purposeful in Life broadcast here at BD
We
Local?
we do 2 1-hour episodes, so we usually just do twice a month on a Monday,
Okay.
and then they do the Facebook Live on there, and then it's on the BD Local podcast app. So if anybody's listening, you probably found us either through Facebook Live or through BD Local or one of the other resources where it's going to be pushed out to in the future, like Apple iTunes and what have you. So I really like that you're mixing together our faith and belief and our business, because that's where our values collide with one another.
I do.
And that's where we can resonate with people. And I think it's better for us to work with people that we resonate with,
Right.
that have the same values. So many people, whatever business they're in, they could be a real estate agent and they're like, I want to help everybody. Or a loan officer in the mortgage business that's like, I do every kind of loan imaginable. And you're like, yeah, it looks blurry. I mean, if you ever seen
Right.
an ad sheet, imagine if there's a big ad behind us and it has like 15 different things that loan officer does.
Right.
Well, you move on to the next one, because what the individual is looking for is like a VA loan or an FHA loan.
Right.
If you have two, then it's like, oh, okay, this guy does these two, and you're actually going to get more business by being focused.
Right.
And people don't understand that. So that focus part is important, but also just making sure that people resonate with our faith and beliefs, which is something that I've kind of come into over the less than the last year, where I realized it's like, how do I interject that into my business?
Yeah.
And so I just lay it out there. That's why I gave you one of my business cards, and I recently made new business cards from our networking group. One of the guys that you and I met through has a print company. And so I was like, I want my values on the back, being integrity, leadership, and quality. And I didn't want to just have the words, because they don't mean anything, right?
Right.
So integrity is doing what is right at all times, no matter the cost. And for me, that means in business is that I'll go out of business to do what I think is right. It doesn't mean it's always doing what the other person thinks is right, because that happens sometimes where somebody expects you to do something. You're like, that's not what we agreed to,
Yeah.
or that's out of our control. That's another contractor or
Right.
whatever. It's like, well, you have to be patient with the people, which is not always easy, right?
No.
Because I recently had that happen where somebody was like coming after me, like, you did this wrong. And I'm like, no, I didn't. we showed up and we couldn't do the work because there wasn't power at the house.
Right.
So then we had to send my guys to another crew, to another job, and so it got delayed. And then they're blaming the delays on us, and I was
Yeah.
like, no. So we don't like. Nobody likes to be like have the finger pointed at them when they actually it's not even something they could have controlled.
Right.
However, if it was my fault, then my job would be to be like, hey, we messed up. How do I make it right? Right? And so that's where the integrity comes in. And leadership is to put other people first. I don't think leadership, there's a couple different viewpoints of leadership. One of them is authority,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is out of service. And so I want to be a leader out of service where people feel safe and secure.
Right.
And I think that Simon Sinek says something about leadership where to be a leader is to create other leaders.
Yeah.
Right. And so now that's a thought that's mulling around in my head because, like, how do I help influence other people to become leaders themselves?
Right.
And out of service, right? I serve them, they serve those below, or not really below because it's not a hierarchy, but people that they're have authority over or people that have to answer to them,
Right.
right? And then the last one is quality. We want to provide the best quality and service to our abilities.
That's excellent.
And something else that I really like, this is totally side note, is the Kaizen principle, which I probably pronounced completely wrong because it's a Japanese
Don't worry about
phrase. Yeah, I can't.
Guys, that'll work today.
I call it Kaizen. If you want to correct me, I don't mind. But it's the Japanese principle of continuous improvement. And a long time ago, I worked for Toyota. I was mentioning to you because we were talking about Grant Cardone and
Right.
sales stuff. Toyota, that's their like big thing is continuous improvement. And so like that always stuck with me because I think that's just an important thing to be growing and trying to improve. So yeah, the congruency, I really love that you have a podcast that's
Thank
talking
you.
about bringing into harmony or congruency or partnership our faith and beliefs
Right.
and our values within the work that we do. And if bringing it full circle back to people that resonate with us, we'll be able to serve those that resonate with us better than someone who doesn't.
Right.
So if someone's an atheist, doesn't believe in God, hates me because I do, they're not the right customer for me.
It's kind of hard to work with that.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people like the realtor or the mortgage guy example that think they have to serve everybody. You're better off if you narrow down your focus and just serve people that you have a likeness with.
Right.
It's not that if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, can you help me?" I'm not going to turn them down necessarily. Although I have, but that's a whole different story. But that's where I have intuition or the Holy Spirit, and I don't know which one's which sometimes. But when you have to listen to that, right? Like I had a customer in the last few weeks that was like saying, "Hey, I want to hire you," and just some red flags came up, and I had to tell my sales manager that I hired. I was trying to answer questions, and then finally I was just like, "We can't help that person." And he was like, "Okay," but I could tell his voice was hurt because he's thinking,
I worked hard to
commission.
get this,
And
right?
I went
Yeah.
to Seattle, or Everett or something. I came back. I've been doing all this paperwork back and forth. I've spent like days trying to get this job, and I just told we're not helping this customer because of the feeling that I had. And Thomas, my sales manager, was like, "Okay, I trust you." But I could tell that trust was just him having faith in me
Yeah.
and not necessarily him understanding. And I didn't want to be that leader of authority. I wanted to make sure he understood. So I told him, a story of like a customer that when we were doing general contracting stuff, we did like this little tiny bathroom, and the floor was a luxury vinyl plank that like lays in place. So it's like a float type floor. And on the manufacturer specifications, it said not to use glue. But I told my guy that worked for me to use the pressure release glue so it still can pop up or put back down because I didn't want it sliding because I wanted to have a nice tight seal.
Right.
Because it's a bathroom
It's a
next to a
bathroom.
shower.
Exactly.
Right. And the customer was like, "I saw that you did this," and he read everything. Right. And after we started working and demoed the bathroom we're working on, he was telling me that he was in lawsuits with both the neighbors that connected to him.
That's helpful
And I'm like,
information.
I wish I'd known that before.
Exactly.
But, maybe not because I wouldn't have maybe made the decision to walk away before because I wasn't listening to the intuition as much back then. But nonetheless, at that point, he was like arguing about this. And I'm like, no, that's the way to do this. I don't really care what the manufacturer says in this situation, right? Because I would do that 100% of the time in this situation. Like if it's in front of a sink or a toilet
Right.
or a shower, I mean, like it's the right thing to do in this situation. And he was like complaining back and forth. And finally, I was like, Dad, let's go pick up our tools. My dad's my business partner.
Mm.
And I go, and you can tell the guy, because he's older, that we're going to void our contract, and explain to him that we're $1,800 in the hole so far after the down payment on this job, but we're willing to walk away if he signs that we walk away. Like 8 months later, the guy tried to come back to me and get me to pay for a new contractor and the old floor, the new floor, and all that kind of stuff. And it ended up not happening because I turned it over to my attorney, which is terrible to have to do that.
Right.
But I told that to Thomas, I was like, when you managed lumber liquidators, the stores, and you were doing $500,000 in sales a month, I bet you had customers that had to turn over to corporate and legal and all that. And I was like, did you see the personality traits in those people? Do they remind you of this guy? And of my story that I told him after I told him that experience, and he was like, yes. So then he understood and didn't have that heaviness on him, like, oh, Garrett's taking a sale away from me, because it's like you don't want to go into something that's not going to be a good fit,
Right.
and it's okay to do that, and that guy was like, why am I chasing you instead of you chasing us? It's like, because we're here to serve people that we resonate with and that feel good about working with us, not make every sale,
Exactly.
so that's where my company values and beliefs interject. And when I found him to hire him, that guy Thomas, I was talking about my faith and my values from the get-go. It was like I needed to make sure that he resonated with that, and that if he's going to represent me, that he's representing that. And he actually reminds me of it sometimes, because I'll get frustrated and be like, oh, I'm going to do blah, 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 whatever, right? He's like, well, Garrett, what are your values? It's good to have that, right?
It is.
Because then you have that sounding board and you're like, I'm just venting. I'm not going to do that. But I really like that you have this podcast. I think it's going to be a good service, and listeners will be like, I want to hear about how faith interjects with business. And there's a lot of us out there, because a lot of people that don't want to work for other people have great faith,
Yeah, they do.
because it takes a lot of gumption and faith in yourself and in our Creator to provide for us, to go out and work for free or at a loss for years, knowing that there's a greater opportunity at the end.
Right.
By being an entrepreneur, you may have heard this said before, but people only an entrepreneur will work 80 hours a week to make less than they were working 40. But the reason is we want to work for ourselves, and we want to be able to represent our faith and beliefs, and being able to conceptualize that or articulate it is something that I couldn't do up front. Like 8-9 years ago when I came to this, it was
Right.
like, I want to be able to create some wealth and have some freedom. And now, after all these years, that I'm starting to actually make a plateau and grow the business, and have success that I didn't have earlier on, because it takes a lot of time. Now I'm actually going, oh, light bulbs going off. How can we help people that are just starting out
Right.
to figure out how to articulate what their purpose is, which is why the Purposeful in Life podcast exists. It's for people, but it's also for businesses. So they can then figure out how to look at their day and be like, have I done something that fulfills that purpose?
That's excellent.
Which is why me being here does that. So if I could do something every day where I'm teaching and mentoring other people and finding a way to help serve others, so that they can then take that information and grow themselves and help others that they can influence in a positive way. My purpose is for that. If I've done that today, which is the opportunity on this podcast, but also when I call Thomas back, when he texts me or whatever, as we're working through the business, that's how I can be like, oh, I am doing my purpose. Because we all get busy
Right.
with all the little, chores.
But that's an excellent example of congruence, right?
Yes.
Where there's that common thread, there's that harmony of everything flowing together.
Yes.
I had an encounter. I was in Dallas last week at CEO Space International, and I was spending time with a branding guy at an expo, right? And I'm sitting with him doing some work at his table at the expo, and I'm wearing my Vineyard USA polo from I am a part of the Vineyard church movement, and Jerry is not wearing anything branded, right? So somebody comes up to the table and they start immediately addressing me and ignoring him, and
Yeah.
they're talking to me,
Because
and
you have this stuff.
right,
Yeah.
right. And at some point, they clue in that I've got some brand information on my shirt, which is why they started talking to me in the first place.
Hmm.
And what's Vineyard? And it's like, no, it's the Vineyard Christian Fellowship. I'm a part of the Vineyard movement. And it's like, oh, okay. And that conversation sort of ends. I
Hmm.
move away from that table and that conversation, and I'm just kind of cruising the room, and some guy comes up to me who had sort of been on the peripheral of that conversation and heard it. And next thing I know, we're in a conversation about his daughter and his family going to church, and how they're struggling with feeling really fulfilled in the church that they're at, and they're questioning. And so here I am in the middle of this expo with all of these CEOs and entrepreneurs and business people talking about Jesus, talking about the church, talking about my
Hmm.
faith. And then afterwards, when it's completely over, I'm walking down the hallway, and Jerry catches up with me. He says, "So you realize we're brothers, right?" And it was cool because I mean, it synced all of those conversations about, I'm there to do business. I'm there to
Yes.
learn. I'm there to create relationships. And what ties it all together, what pulls it together in harmony, congruence,
Hmm.
is faith.
Yeah.
And that's really how I came to this. In executive leadership, what I notice so often is that we put on all these different hats, right? And
Hmm.
we show up this way for that, and this way for that, and this way for that. When we go home, we take all those hats off, and then we put a different one on.
Hmm.
When we're with the kids, we put a hat on. All of these different hats. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But when we were able to slow down and really just kind of let our faith run our life
Hmm.
and flow through and bleed into everything that we're doing in our lives, that's when we have peace, right? That's when
Yes.
we have flow, and that's when the energy, the spirit of God is able to flow through us. And we're able to catch up with the work he's already doing in and around us, and to
Hmm.
work to co-labor with him in that work. And that's how I came up with that. So thank you very much for paying so much attention to congruence, and that's awesome.
I like it. Are you gonna? What's your plan with the podcast that we're speaking to you on right now? All of our guests
Hmm.
is there an intention or a goal behind it? Are you hoping to be able to like write a book or have some kind of blog post where you can like share with other people and get this message across that you can have congruence in your life between work and business and your family and God in your life? Is there some end goal in that?
That's an excellent question. No one's asked me that, as I've prepped with other people about doing the podcast. No one's asked that question before. I so first and foremost, I want people to know who and what I am, so that when folks approach me with the work I do with Leadwell, they
Hmm.
they really have a crystal clear idea of who I am. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I was thinking yesterday. I was walking out of a networking meeting and thinking, there's absolutely no reason why I can't take the heart of of the messages I get with each of the guests that I work with,
Hmm.
and really highlight a component of that where faith really does show up in the work they do. So that is
And
something.
collaborate to create
Exactly.
something.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that. Have you been able to, like with networking, and I think CEO Space probably helped you out a lot with this, because I'm a member as well, obviously, because I introduced you to it. But have you been able to like hone down what it is that you're looking for when you're with other business people, so that they can see how they can help you or how you can help them?
Yeah, that was a big piece of it. And, you know, right now, what I'm looking for from other business people
Hmm.
is I'm really on a growth curve, right? And so relationship and mentoring and growing. Uh, and Alec Stern was there from, he just sold Constant Contact a couple years ago,
Oh wow.
$1.1 billion. Talk about humbling when a guy like Alex sits right next to you and he's working on your business plan.
Hmm.
It was, wow, that was mind blowing. So that's the primary thing that I'm looking for from other business people. Um, in the community, what I'm looking for is simply an opportunity to serve and to give.
Mm.
I have a unique set of talents because of my experience as a pastor, as my experience as a counselor, my experience running nonprofits, and I really want to find opportunities to serve and just to be open to where God takes that.
Awesome.
I don't want to completely leave that little nugget you threw in there though about you introducing me to CEO space. I I don't know if you could see this on the podcast. That's part of why I like it being recorded on video. But I brought orange to
Mm.
celebrate my friend Garrett because
Oh, because I always wear these orange
Garrett
shirts.
always wears orange. And Garrett was the very first person that I really connected to after I started my business. Garrett introduced me to another network of folks that has become very special to me. And I just spent 8 days, 12 hours a day drinking the
or
Kool
or
Aid
more.
with CEO Space International. That's been really cool. And I see you brought a sort of a branded cup as well. And I actually had notes to ask you
Yes.
about. Um, so I'm gonna move there if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Talk to me a little bit about why you brought a pink coffee cup onto the podcast
Oh,
show.
it's great that we're talking about faith because then I can be completely inappropriate. This says save second base.
All
And
right,
American culture, second base is the boobies, right? So we want to
all right.
save the boobies, right?
There we go.
My favorite base.
All right, we said that. We said that on the podcast. Um,
Yes. It's for the American Cancer Society, right?
awesome.
And they're doing a big push where real men wear pink. So I also have a pink shirt that you've probably seen me wear.
I have seen it.
I need to get a few more of them, but for the month of October, what they're doing is they've had men that volunteered to raise at least $2,500 for the American Cancer Society. So I volunteered like without hesitation. In fact, I want to talk about volunteering without hesitation, and then we'll get back to the American
Go
Cancer
for
Society.
it.
I know we only have a couple minutes, but the it's important, and I think this was back to my intuition or the Holy Spirit thing.
Hmm.
When we feel called to do something as men, as women, whatever, just as individuals, that do it.
Yeah.
When you have that thing in the back of your head,
When you have it.
yes, when you have that and you're like, boom, 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 you're like, try to ignore it, especially, and it just keeps on coming up.
Right.
I don't ignore it very much anymore.
Yeah.
Like I was in Habitat for Humanity and they're like, hey, can you help us with a roof in this
Right.
neighborhood? And I was like, I'll do the whole neighborhood, which is donating more than I made last year.
Yeah.
Um, how? I'm still figuring it out, right? Because they were like one a month, and it's actually becoming more than that because they're moving the neighborhood along faster.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to figure out how. But we do that because we're sitting there in the moment, and it's like that's the thought that came out. So I mentioned to you before, I sometimes don't have a filter. It's just like, well, no, I'm going to go for it. So when I met a gentleman, Lamarco, who works for the American Cancer Society, cancer
Yeah.
survivor, family members have been survivors or passed away from cancer for him. I don't have cancer in my family, but we all experience it. We have friends that have cancer or have died from it. A friend of mine, son, who's like 6 years old, has cancer,
Mm.
and that just like breaks my heart. That what they're dealing with. They've had like the hardest year of their
Yeah.
lives. Seeing him go through that suffering of chemo and everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's our responsibility to step up when called.
Yeah. I
So
agree.
yeah, so I'm raising money, and this month what we're doing is I'll raise the 2,500 on my own by donating $200 from every roof that we sell or finish this month.
That's
So
excellent.
that's easy enough, but I'm also asking all of my customers to
Mhm.
match it.
Cool. How's that
So
gone so far?
well, we've only got a couple. I haven't even actually input any of the money yet because
Alright.
it's still like
October
pretty
just
early,
started,
just
right?
pretty early in the month. But every customer that I've approached said, yes, send me the link and I'll match it. Right. So that's going to be good,
That's great.
because we just all want to help, and obviously that would be a good thing. Maybe in like the show notes or whatever on the Facebook thing, I could put the link so that people
Sure.
can do that as
I'm
well.
sure we can do that.
I'll submit it. I just have to look it up.
I'll talk
But
to my producer Tim about that. See
yeah,
if he can help that.
we'll get Tim's
Help
help on
make
that.
that happen.
But you can see how these conversations go so quickly
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what this is about. So I just take this mug with me almost everywhere because I want to support that.
We have 5 minutes left. You had put some thought into the questions that I gave you earlier, and you identified a Bible passage, a verse that really spoke to you. Do you want to share that real quick?
Yeah, it goes right along with everything that we've been saying. I just heard it like last week at church, and I was like, "What?" I mean, it seemed like a quote that you would hear just from one of these memes or
Mm-hmm.
something. It's James 4:17. It says, "If anyone knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them."
Ooh.
And to me, I took that as when, I mean, kind of what we just talked about. When you
Yeah.
get that Holy Spirit or intuition or both that says, "Hey, you should probably do this,"
You do it.
you do it, otherwise it's wrong. The
Right.
Bible's calling it sin. I don't know if I go that strong, but the Bible's right. I'm not, right? I'm just like, well, it is what it is. But the reality is you're going to have fulfillment and peace when you make that leap and do that.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're called to donate to something, whether it be this or at church,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of course, a lot of pastors say tithing is to the church, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think tithing is giving back to the community, and it's way more than the 10%,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's a matter of giving back to the community in order to share God's love
Right.
and the gospel, right? And if that means that we're giving to Luana for her feeding the homeless
Mm-hmm.
and sharing the gospel that way, or the American Cancer Society, which is probably a more liberal organization, but whatever, they're helping and serving our
Yeah.
community, or Habitat for Humanity, or for your church or what have you, wherever you're led, that service will produce more fruit in the long run. And I'm just having faith that that's going to be, and I believe it is,
I
without
totally
without a
agree.
doubt. So that's where that comes in. But it also goes to other stuff. It's about living your purpose.
Yeah.
So the people that are wannapreneurs, like they want to be entrepreneurs, but they're not going in,
Right. You're not taking the risk,
you s- you
not
still have to pay your
trusting.
bills. We're not saying don't pay your bills or quit or whatever. I mean, I did a little bit of that where I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm diving in the deep end with the sharks. Whatever happens, happens. I'll fix the problems later.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm crazy. Most people have to like, and what most people recommend, and I do too, is build up some money.
Right.
You know,
Get to a place where you replaced your.
I have a nephew. He like messaged me on Facebook, and he's like, "What does it take to rent an apartment on your own?" And so I told him, and then
Mm-hmm.
I said, "You should get two jobs, and you should save money because my dream for you is to save $20,000 and start your own business."
Right.
And then I go, "What's your dream for you?" He's 23. He did not respond. But you can see I'm like I was trying to like implant a vision for him that
Mm-hmm.
he can do more than what he's doing.
That's awesome. That's
So,
awesome.
okay.
Well, we're just under 3 minutes, so I'm going to just go ahead and again just do a shout out to you.
Oh, thank you.
So, Garrett Willie with Do It Right Roofing. I'm so glad that you're here. You made the transition from a job to starting a business in this community. Just such a welcoming experience for me. And so that's
Thank you.
why when you said you'd be willing to be on my podcast, I was just so honored. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We are going to put, I'm hoping that it won't be any challenge to put information about Real Men Wear Pink and how our viewers can donate for the American Cancer Society. You also sort of did a shout out for Habitat for Humanity, some amazing work that they're doing here in Pierce County and the greater
Hmm.
Tacoma community. I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for joining us today. And our last podcast was over 500 viewers, and I am so excited about that. That's excellent. If you know somebody that you'd like to recommend to be on the podcast, somebody that you think, boy, they have a story that you'd like to have told, they're a business leader or a civic person or a pastor that you'd really like to have them showcased, and Congruence, where faith and business really speaks for them, let us know, and be glad to talk to them about being on the show. We are looking for sponsors.
Mm.
A couple of sponsors doing like $45 an episode goes a long way. So if you or a business that you know wants to sponsor the show, we'd love to have that. My paying gig is I'm the owner of Leadwell Pacific, and I work with leaders that want to find congruence
Hmm.
and want to make a difference in the lives of their company, the lives of their community by pulling it all together. And I do that with executive coaching and leadership development work. So, want to encourage you. I have room for a couple of clients right now. So, if that'd be of interest to you, my information is on the runner at the bottom of the podcast. So please reach out and be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.